days with a woman unkind, smoked my stuff and drank all my wine. Made up my mind, make a new start. I'm going to California with an aching in my heart. Someone told me there's a girl out there with love in her eyes and flowers in her hair. I didn't see too many this time.
In this video, we're going to talk about the key elements of an effective safety management system. And I say in this video, it's actually probably going to be part 1, part 2, part 3, maybe part 4. A lot of material that I want to go over here. And because there is so much material, I might not elaborate on each point as much as I normally would. This will be a review for many of you. It may be new material for some of you though. If you have any questions about anything, please let me know. The first thing I want to talk about is the 3 E's of safety. Herbert Heinrich, who is considered the father of modern workplace safety, in one of his books, listed education, engineering, and enforcement as the 3 main elements of safety management. In education, we're training everyone to identify, know what's dangerous and know how to avoid the hazards. Engineering has to do with controlling the work environment, eliminating hazards, and enforcement has to do with monitoring workers and making sure workers are doing the right thing. I could do a whole 50-minute lecture just on Heinrich and his 3 E's of safety. But because of time constraints, I'm going to go ahead and move on and say that the 3 E's of safety really aren't enough. This was back in the 1930s when Heinrich was doing his research and sharing his ideas. We've learned a lot about safety management since then. I would argue that instead of just the 3 E's of safety, we have 5 E's and a P of safety. There's education, training's important. Engineering, coming up with controls in the work environment, also important. And we'll talk more about engineering and controls in Unit 4. Evaluation, monitoring the workplace activity, also important. Enforcement, the way Heinrich had more of a, let's crack down on the workers and make them do the right thing approach to enforcement. That still may be part of enforcement occasionally, part of safety management occasionally, but the evaluation and the coaching of workers, coaching workers to work more safely. I like to think of it in those terms instead of forcing workers to work more safely. Enforcement just has negative connotations for me. Enthusiasm and passion is important for the success of a safety management system. If you have a company that doesn't take safety seriously, they're not passionate about the importance of safety, that's not going to be an effective system. If you have safety professionals who aren't real passionate about safety, they're not going to have as much success, I would argue. Now, there are safety professionals who don't have they're not all fired up all the time about safety. They're not that passionate about safety. They're still able to have a good career as safety professionals, but they're not going to have the success that as someone who really is, balls to the wall about protecting workers. And it's all about implementing controls to create a safe workplace so workers are not injured or even killed. That's the kind of passion that is, I think, very important in safety management. And this goes back to this point about coaching and enforcement. I think the coaching and encouragement with workers, when you're working one-on-one or one-on-five with workers, you don't want to come across as the enforcer, as the safety cop. You want to come across as the encouraging, coaching type of safety manager that's helping them to work more safely. You're there to help them, not be a detriment to them in any way. So encouragement is important also as a safety manager. A lot of what we do in safety management really is more about relationships. Relationships not between us and not just between us and the workers, but us and other members of management and everybody involved in the organization. If you have good relationships, if the workers trust you, you're going to be more successful as a safety manager. Then finally, the P. We have the 5 E's here. The P has to do with planning. And we will talk a lot about the importance of planning in Unit 4 this semester. Now, these are very broad, very general elements of an effective safety management program. Let's be more specific. Top management needs to be involved. They need to be committed to safety. If they're not, it's going to be hard to have success. Now, I'm going to just run through this list very quickly. I'll talk about each in more detail on subsequent slides. You have to have buy-in from frontline supervisors. If there's any terminology here that's not, you don't understand, you haven't heard before, I'll explain it later. Involvement from line and craft personnel. A continual improvement philosophy. A written safety policy or a written safety program, using these terms interchangeably. A proactive emphasis on planning and prevention is important. Data-driven. We're making decisions based upon data that have been collected. We're not just flipping a coin to decide what the best path forward is. We're using data to inform decisions. And this we'll talk more about this in Unit 4, the uses of data in safety management. Incident investigation. We investigate our incidents to learn from those incidents to prevent future similar incidents. Clear roles and responsibilities as far as who has what responsibility when it comes to safety management. And it's not just the safety professionals, or it shouldn't be. Everyone should have a clear role and a clear responsibility when it comes to the safety performance in the workplace. A recognition program, recognizing workers or parts of a company that excel in safety management. Also, an accountability program. The flip side of recognition is holding company divisions, crews, individuals accountable when they aren't performing as well as they could be. Internal monitoring, honest evaluation, bringing in third parties occasionally to consult and to help us with our continual improvement. And these 3 points here really do go along with the continual improvement philosophy, which more on all of this as we move forward. Training's important, effective training. And then finally, good relationships within the organization, combined with a good attitude toward the importance of safety. And so much of it goes back to top management involvement. So let's talk more about top management involvement. Actually, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Before we talk about top management involvement, I want to talk about a proactive approach to safety management versus a reactive approach to safety management. We can categorize companies or safety systems into these two categories: proactive or reactive. The better programs are going to be more proactive. They are going to be prevention driven. They're going to try to prevent accidents before the accidents occur. Reactive, on the other hand, they're all about complying with the laws. They only do the bare minimum to comply with the regulations. And here are some more specific characteristics of a proactive system versus a reactive system. In a proactive system, top management takes responsibility. They contribute to collaboration and discussion of safety at all levels in the organization. In a reactive system, top management does not take responsibility. They put everything on the shoulders of the safety manager, the safety department, the safety program. First company I was with, it was actually the first fatality. And the investigator, the OSHA investigator, was talking to the company owner about the company owner's role within the company when it came to safety. And he didn't mean anything mean by it, but it sounded really bad. Well, we have a full-time safety manager who has responsibility for all that, who takes care of all of our safety-related issues. Ultimately, what he said, which that's not the right answer. That's not the right answer. It's not about the safety manager. It's about those top managers at the very top that are also just as invested in safety as anyone else, as the safety manager, and are supporting the safety manager. The proactive company, they invest financial resources to prevent accidents. They understand that good safety or safety management will provide a good return on investment. The reactive companies, they view safety as a cost that yields little or no return on investment. They don't understand the role that safety can play in the financial health of the company. When it comes to accident investigations or how the company responds when bad things happen, the proactive company, they openly investigate and openly discuss the incidents. They want to learn from the incident to do better in the future. In a reactive company, they may want to hide the incident. They want to sweep it under the rug. They may conduct themselves as if everything's a secret. We don't want to talk about it. If we talk about it, somebody's going to hear about it, and that's going to make us look bad. Well, what makes those companies look bad is when that happens again in the future. In a proactive company, safety is a 24/7 commitment. It's always high up the priority list, if not at the very top. Reactive companies, safety is only emphasized when bad stuff happens. There's a fatality, so all of the top management gets serious about safety for about 6 months. In my experience, that increased emphasis on safety after something bad happens, like a fatality, that only lasts for about 6 months. It eventually cools down and goes back to the way it was before the incident. They forget their emphasis on safety, the importance of safety. And I've got my second company. I've got some really good stories I could tell about this exact issue. But again, we don't have time here. If you'd like to talk more about any of this, let me know. Proactive safety management is priority. Reactive safety management is an inconvenience. They only do it because the insurance company is telling them to, or they think they need to do it because of OSHA. Again, they're compliance driven. I had my second company, again, I had a VP tell me that the only thing he cares about is that we don't receive any serious OSHA citations. He was okay with minor OSHA citations, and he was okay with people getting injured, but he didn't want any serious OSHA citations on the company's record. That's just crazy. That second company I was with, great example of a reactive safety culture. And it was really it's really challenging. That's one thing I want to talk more about here in a second, is what we do if we end up working in a reactive safety environment. But back to my list here. Frontline supervisors and line or craft workers are empowered to be involved in safety. They're invited to be involved in safety issues. Their ideas are listened to by upper management. In a reactive system, nobody cares what the front line or the workers think about safety. And if a frontline supervisor has a recommendation, probably going to be ignored. If a worker has a recommendation, he's definitely going to be ignored in these kinds of companies. Upper management, they're not good managers in reactive companies. It's all about production. It's all about creating that product, building the bridge or building the air conditioners. They don't think about how the company could be better. They're just not good managers. And what we see in the construction industry a lot of times that leads to this, we see construction people who advance through the company and they end up in upper management positions, but they're not managers. They can build a bridge, they're a hell of an engineer, but they don't have the management skills necessary for the betterment of the company. And hopefully, moving on here, hopefully you guys will end up working for a proactive company, a company that is prevention driven. They want to do the right thing. They have a good, strong safety culture and so on. But you may not. You may end up in one of these reactive companies, which that's okay. You can still have a good career, or at least the beginnings of a good career, get a few years experience and move on to another company. Or you can fight out, stay with that company and keep working and churning away to get that company to where it needs to be, which is very challenging. It's very hard to convince upper managers who aren't good managers that safety is important. A lot of what we do, like I said earlier on, or like I'm going to say on the next slide here, a lot of what we do is being a salesperson for safety. In these reactive companies, we're training our upper management, we're training our bosses about the importance of safety. And we have to be very gentle about that. Because we're lower on the chain of command, we have to be very careful how we conduct this training as we try to impress upon our bosses about the importance of effective safety management. Management involvement in general is important, and when I talk about management, we're talking about regional managers and above, VPs, CEOs, CFOs, the corporate decision makers, the people that really make the decision, that really have the pull within the company. These are the people that need to be involved. If they're not, it's going to be very difficult. And if they're not, then we need to train them to be more involved. Again, very gently, train them, bring them into the safety world and get them involved. Hopefully, management, if not now, will eventually be true believers in the importance of safety. Our management needs to be communicating the importance of the safety message, especially to frontline supervisors. They also need to be listening to frontline supervisors. They need to value the input of the frontline supervisors. Upper management should be actively collaborating with safety management. It shouldn't be like the example I used earlier where, hey, well, we got a safety manager for that. I don't need to be involved with that. They need to be actively collaborating. Again, I said I wasn't going to elaborate too much on these points, but I've got to talk again about Kiewit, how well they do safety. Again, not perfect. They do have incidents, but they're the best I've seen in the construction world. And one of the things they do well is through their management involvements. Upper management, they get out on the job site, not just to look at concrete being poured or steel girders being hung. They get out on the job site to talk about safety, to do their own safety audits or safety inspection. And if they don't like something, they're going to let people know about it. They're going to make sure it's corrected if there's something that's not to their standard or the Kiewit standard. Another thing that was cool about Kiewit, every meeting, didn't matter what kind of meeting it was, every meeting started with some kind of statement about safety. which goes along with the importance they place on safety. And that's the kind of management involvement, the kind of prioritizing of safety that companies need to be successful. And if there's that kind of involvement, it's going to make the company money in the long run. It's going to, more importantly, it's going to be protecting workers and their families from loss. Frontline supervisors. I've used this term a couple of times now. What do we mean by frontline supervisors? We're talking about the supervisors that are actually supervising the work that's taking place. They're out on the factory floor. They're on the construction site. They're managing the workers who are actually assembling the air conditioners or pouring the concrete. The title for these frontline supervisors might be foreman, lead man or lead person, or superintendent. And other companies may have other titles for this frontline supervisor also. Frontline supervisors, whether they buy into safety or not, it's oftentimes going to be a reflection of upper management. The front line, they are going to be whatever upper management communicates to them as being important. If upper management is communicating the importance of safety, then the frontline supervisors are going to be more likely to buy into the importance of safety. If upper management, if all they talk about is production and how much concrete is poured or how many air conditioners are assembled, then that's, frontline picks up on that. They see what's important to their bosses, and they're going to give their bosses what their bosses want. So it all goes back to upper management and the importance of upper management and communicating the right message to everyone else in the company. Frontline supervisors can be involved in training. They can do field safety training. They can do all kinds of different safety training activities. At a good company, the frontline supervisor has a role in training. They're involved in planning, work plans, operations hazard analysis. They're monitoring their workers, and they're taking corrective action when needed. A good frontline supervisor doesn't need a safety professional to say, to tell the workers that, hey, you need to put your harness on. The frontline supervisor should already take care of that if they buy into safety and value the importance of safety. They should recognize their crew for positive safety behaviors and safety achievements. They need to be the encouragers for their crew when it comes to safety. Finally, the frontline supervisor should be an exemplary of safety. They need to lead by example. They need to wear their PPE. They should never take chances or a risk, because if their workers see them taking a chance, then the worker's going to think, well, the boss did it, so it must be okay. They got to be good examples. They lead by that example. Management needs to listen to frontline supervisors, and you're probably wondering why this bridge is up here. This is the Old Combs Bridge. The company I was with tore down the old bridge and built a new one out there on the Illinois River, about 10 miles from Tahlequah. But upper management did not listen to frontline supervisors. If they had, they would have saved about $400,000 on this job. Frontline supervisors kept asking, they weren't really saying, frontline supervisors kept asking, how are we going to get the concrete trucks over this bridge? Concrete trucks weigh 65, 70,000 pounds. This bridge would not handle a 65,000 pound concrete truck. They were also asking, well, how are we going to get our crane over this bridge, which weighs a heck of a lot more than the concrete trucks? We'll figure that out. That was basically the management response. We'll figure that out. Well, they didn't figure it out. They bid the job. They bid the job too low. They ended up barely making any money on the project because they weren't listening to the front line. we eventually had to invest money in a portable bridge that would support the weight of the concrete trucks. The crane, we couldn't get the cranes across here, across the portable bridge. We had to take a 2-hour route through back roads to get the crane into this location on the Illinois River, which cost a lot of money. Moving that crane on those back roads, a lot of time. Time is money. And to make a long story short, this job would have been more profitable, would have been more safe if management had listened to frontline. You got to have that communication at all levels in the organization. Your workers, who are the craft and line personnel, they need to be involved also. Again, when you see the term craft or line, this is a common term for the men and women, skilled and unskilled, using their hands and doing their work. They're usually paid hourly. Not always, but usually paid hourly. But that's what we mean by the term craft personnel or line personnel. They need to have the opportunity to provide input into the safety management system. One way to do that, companies use what we call safety observation reports or observation cards, SOAR reports. It's a suggestion box where any employee can turn in an observation card with a recommendation. It needs to be reviewed by management. If a company does this, the recommendations need to be anonymous. And the review by management is important. If management is just throwing these in the dumpster at the end of the month and they're not actually reviewing them, workers will eventually figure that out and they're gonna give up. They're not going to be involved. Another way to get workers involved is through a program called the Craft Voice and Safety, or CIVIS. At Kiewit, CIVIS involved a weekly meeting of workers who were involved. These workers, there was a rep from each crew or production team on the project. This weekly meeting, in addition to these reps from these different crews, there was also the project or the facility management person and safety management person at these meetings. And this meeting was to talk about safety. Another way to involve the workers is to have them do some training, different types of training. Also have them involved in a stretch and flex program. But getting the workers involved is important for the health of the safety management program. Also, we need to make sure that when workers share ideas, that there is a response, whether it's an observation card or some other kind of input. Workers will lose interest if their ideas are not recognized. If you ask workers for ideas and all of their ideas are ignored, it doesn't mean you have to go with every idea they throw out there, but the good ideas, if there are good ideas, and there will be, some of the best ideas I've ever had when it comes to safety management come from the workers. So, and if workers share their ideas and nobody's responding to them, they're going to give up. It's going to hurt morale. One last slide, and then I'll put a cork in this video. A good worker involvement article from the Professional Safety Journal, which is a magazine published by the ASSP. Here it is, Worker Participation Programs, a multi-element approach. This article is available to ASSP members. If you're not a member of the ASSP, I recommend you join the ASSP. It's very inexpensive for students and gives you access to a lot of cool resources. In addition to worker involvement being a best practice, involving workers in some way is really an OSHA requirement. And also, if a company wants to be ISO 45001 certified, they need to have a way for workers to be involved. And we're going to talk more about ISO 45001 later in this unit.